Hello, Where We Are listeners. If you're a longtime fan of this podcast or you're just joining us for the first time today, we want to tell you more about our podcast platform called Spotify for Podcasters. We've been using this platform for over a year, and it's been easy to use, and new features are added all the time. You can record and edit podcasts from your phone or computer. You don't need anything fancy, and you don't need previous podcast experience. When you hit publish, you will distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard. Video podcasts are also available on Spotify if that's your kind of thing. And with Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. But here's the thing, you can earn money, but it's a free platform. There's no catch. If you're curious or want to see what it's all about, download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started.
On this week's episode of Where We Are, catch up with the Wheres. We'll catch you up on everything that happened over the last week in our lives and also in the life of the UK. A lot is happening. A lot is changing, and a lot stays the same. The one and only Boris Johnson, back for the sequel. We'll talk about that and more on Where We Are. You're listening to Where We Are. We are the Wheres. I'm Michael.
I'm Melissa.
And Melissa, we made it to the end of the week. As promised, I didn't want to have to do another episode where I was like, I promise, like an announcement is coming. So we actually did make not just one announcement last week, but two. The first is I launched the Center for Christianity and Public Life, a new nonprofit based in the nation's capital with the mission to contend for the credibility of Christian resources in public life for the public good. We won't talk too much about it on the episode today, but you can go to ccpubliclife.org. That's ccpubliclife.org. And learn more. I'm really excited, have a great team, have a wonderful board, and it's been an incredible week. The feedback we've received, the people who are excited about our mission and our work. We announced that we'll be launching what we call a Public Life Fellowship program, and you can learn more about that on the website. In the fall of 2023, we'll hold our first annual conference called For the Good of the Public, and that's an opportunity to present to the public a positive vision for Christian participation in public life and politics. And so really excited about that. That is the Center for Christianity and Public Life is my work now, my full-time plus a gig, and hopefully it will be my work for a long time coming. Melissa, the second announcement that came out this week, I didn't know that it was going to come out this week, but Zondervan announced that I'm writing my next book with Zondervan. And the book is tentatively titled The Kind of People We Are. And it's a book I've wanted to write for a long time. It's a book that applies Dallas Willard's ideas to public life and politics. And I'm very excited about it. It's not finished yet. I'm writing it now. It will come out in the fall, winter of 2023. And so those are the announcements. We had a crazy week last week.
Yeah, I mean it was long, but it also flew by. And also for me on my end, I'm going to be sticking with Public Square Strategies, the consulting firm that Michael and I've been running for the past. Well, Michael's been running since 2013, but now is stepping off, and so I'll be taking over Public Square Strategies. For those
There's
of
been
you
a
out
coup.
Here.
There's been a coup.
So for those of you who need consulting with relationships, with business development, communication, strategy, with political analysis, think of it, I probably do it. So please get in touch with me at melissa@publicsquarestrategies.com if you need any help.
Great. Yeah, so that's update on the where end of things. Melissa, can you talk the people through? I feel like we do this like every 3 weeks. Can you talk the people through what is happening in UK politics right now?
Europe seems to fall apart a little bit every 4 weeks. So here I am. The UK, our closest ally, what is going on over there? They're looking a lot like the US. They seem to be joining us in a little bit of political chaos right now. So we've talked about it a little bit on the podcast with the Morning Five, that a few months ago, Boris Johnson, who was the then Prime Minister of the UK, resigned as Prime Minister after a few different scandals. The most recent one had been a sex scandal, and then before that,
Not his.
It
was like was it cabinet official or just
Yes.
someone in the party? Yeah.
Yep, that's exactly right. And before that, a COVID scandal where he had held parties that followed zero COVID protocols, when in the meantime, while he was imposing a lot of COVID protocols on his entire country. So several scandals. So, members of parliament and his cabinet no longer had confidence in him. So there was a 2-month process over the summer where they voted in a new prime minister, who was then Foreign Secretary Liz Truss. And so Liz Truss this past summer inherited a very bad economy that was trying to recover from COVID, an energy crisis because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, an NHS that is pretty much falling apart, and people sort of losing a lot of confidence in the Tories, or the Conservative Party. So Liz Truss is a Tory, or a member of the Conservative Party. So was Boris Johnson, one of the major political parties of the UK for the last several decades. I mean, for a long time. So she just resigned this past week after just 45 days in office. And a lot of her downfall is being pinned on her economic plan, and sort of sending an already very volatile and weak UK economy into a complete and utter tailspin right at the end of September. So on September 23rd, her finance minister, Kwame Kwarteng, announced the largest tax cut in the past 50 years, an estimated 45 billion pounds over 5 years. And so then that following Monday, investors started to dub that economic plan Trussonomics, sort of after Reaganomics, so trickle-down economics, because it was found out that Truss's tax cuts were going to mostly go to the wealthy. And weren't going to go to people, who are suffering under inflation. Because, the UK is also suffering from around 10% inflation, just like the United States, just like the rest of the world.
With major energy concerns.
With major energy concerns. With the fact that, with healthcare, not the sort of stalwart of British healthcare sort of not also being there. So a lot of investors started selling off British currency, the pound, and it came down to a valuation of $1.03. So that is,
my goodness.
That is the lowest ever value to the dollar that the pound has ever experienced.
And so we're happy to announce that next week's episode of Where We Are will be live from London. We've been able to rent out the O2 Arena.
Yeah, the O2 Arena.
Yeah, we've rented out the O2 Arena for $500 American.
You're all invited.
Yes.
Many of us can afford it now. So yes, you've got the global markets just sort of reeling from this economic plan. So the pound, it was devalued. It's since gained back a bit of its value, but it's still at all-time low levels. Now, remember when Brexit happened, the pound also suffered, but this was just unprecedented.
And then there was a huge sell-off in government bonds. So a tiny economics lesson. Government bonds are supposed to be one of the safest investments in the world, one of the most, because government bonds are usually quite stable, especially a country like the UK or the US or an EU, a member of the EU. Like, their government bonds tend to be more well-backed, they're stable. Well, there was a huge sell-off of it, to the point where the Bank of England had to purchase 65 billion pounds worth of bonds and to quote-unquote restore orderly market conditions and basically float the country's pension scheme, because the pension scheme was losing so much money that, pensioners weren't going to get their checks because the UK economy had tanked so hard. So, this was a complete and utter disaster. So her finance minister resigns, and she's trying to pick up the pieces over the past, 2 weeks? So she lost confidence pretty much immediately around 2 to 2.5 weeks ago. She apologized on TV through TV interviews. She hired a sort of debt hawk, new finance minister to reverse all those tax cuts, to reverse this mini budget plan. But it still was not enough. The sort of backpedaling, the quick pivot, compared to most, political decisions, it was quite a quick pivot to suddenly sort of just, get rid of your whole entire budget to start off your premiership. It still meant that she had completely lost confidence of not just her cabinet, members of parliament, her party members, the 81,000 party members who voted her in the first place during this last leadership competition. But a lot of the commentary, and I would have to agree with it, a lot of the commentary is saying that even some of the most stalwart, voters in the country are starting to lose confidence in the Tories, in this Conservative Party, because of Boris Johnson's scandals, and then this just spectacular disaster that was Liz Truss as Prime Minister. Just the shortest Prime Ministership ever in the UK, so 45 days. So right now, we're about to have a contest for new leadership. To
like 2 months after
another
after the previous contest.
Truss
is how Truss ascended. Yeah.
Yes, and it's going to be they're going to try to make it really, really fast. Which again, the last one took 2 months, and they're going to try to do it in like a couple weeks. So that'll be really interesting to watch.
Because no Brits will actually be voting in this one, right?
So Liz Truss got in through party members, around 81,000 of the party members voting her over two other big candidates, Penny Mordaunt and Rishi Sunak. So she wasn't democratically elected in the first place, technically, if we're talking through American terms here. And now they're going to have a contest for them to vote again very, very quickly to put somebody in until the 2024 general election. So the UK does have general elections. It's just that if a prime minister loses favor or loses confidence or resigns for other reasons, new prime ministers are put in through actual votes of the party, not just the general election, the general voting population. So you've got two other people, like I said, Rishi Sunak and Penny Mordaunt, who might be trying to get in there. Rishi is highly favored, but Boris Johnson is said to most likely try to make a go for it again. And there are quite a few party members who would like to have him back, who, the previous scandals and the loss of confidence that he had a few months ago. That was a long time ago. So if we think about, Americans generally having a very short memory span when it comes to politics, the Brits do as well a little bit. So that's the UK right now. It's definitely a different system from the American system.
Melissa, you skipped over the most important facet of this entire debacle.
Yes.
Can you describe the significance of the head of lettuce?
I'm sorry. I'm trying not to make a total spectacle out of explaining this process. Yes. So, what is the publication? Was it The Sun?
It was one of the tabloids.
It was one of the major British tabloids a couple of weeks ago after Trussonomics was introduced, this mini budget was introduced. They started a live feed of a head of lettuce and put out this idea that this head of lettuce, would it last longer than Liz Truss's prime ministership? And it turns out that the lettuce has outlasted
It looked
Truss.
Great.
It was in great shape. It was living its best life.
it looked younger than when it started.
Yeah.
With no cosmetic surgery that we're aware of.
It was feeding off the chaos.
That's right. Yeah,
it was thriving off the chaos.
Oh, man. So the British tabloids
Are something else.
And can just be just gruesome.
Brutal.
Just absolutely brutal.
Brutal.
So, it's going to be interesting to see if Boris can come back. I said this on our episode after Boris resigned, which is, I knew he'd be back, just not this soon.
Yeah.
He's the most talented politician they have. And so really I think after the Truss experiment, Tory members are sort of saying, look, I'm not going to put... Well, I think first they probably feel like a loss is coming. Like Labour is due for a win in 2024. And then they're saying, I'm not going to put sort of my career, my livelihood in another untested politician's hands. At least with Boris, we know what we're getting. At least with Boris, there's a record and a sense that he will look out for his members. Obviously, controversies, sort of ding that a bit. But Boris might be what enough members of Parliament, Tory members of Parliament, are comfortable with that Boris will basically get a second, not a second term because he was, but get a term going through 2024.
Yeah, so the interesting thing there is that you're completely and utterly right. And then there's the other side of that coin where Boris Johnson has been a part of a smaller sect of the Tory party that has been more libertarian. So Theresa May before him, she was prime minister after David Cameron. David Cameron was the last compassionate conservative Tory. Somebody you would think of more as like very much just staunchly in the right, compassionate conservative, your typical Tory. And Theresa May, it's funny, both women prime ministers have inherited just complete messes of a country, because Theresa May came in right after, the Brexit vote, because that's why David Cameron resigned in 2016. She came in to try to make Brexit happen. And Boris Johnson, and Liz Truss are part of this libertarian side of the Tory party. And so Rishi Sunak, who I mentioned before, is more towards the center, maybe more towards the center than maybe even David Cameron was. Some could argue that one, but he would be a sort of turn away from this libertarian side, this libertarian ideology that's been running the UK since 2016, since the Brexit vote happened. And the other thing that hinders Boris Johnson, Brexit, the actual process of Brexit, of leaving the EU, the UK leaving the EU, that began in 2016 after that big Brexit referendum, gave this libertarian wing of the party its identity, its sort of shining beacon on a hill, its goal, something to sort of aim and shoot for. And throughout May's prime ministership, that was, the main through line of, why you would vote for her, why she was the best leader. For Boris Johnson getting in there, it was actually, I'm going to clean things up and I'm going to actually make Brexit happen. And then he did. And I think there has been this sort of loss of, or less of a purpose in terms of, or less of a sort of narrative or messaging around why the Tories would be the best party to continue to lead the UK into the future. And I think Liz Truss, what she was trying to do with this mini budget was trying to really appeal towards the ideological ends of this sort of grouping within the Tories, this libertarian grouping within the Tories, but also give a much bigger economic vision as well to the entire country.
Right.
That, especially since Brexit has happened, it's done. They don't have that to sort of rest on anymore. And Boris Johnson, getting into scandals, like he couldn't sort of go back on like, well, you know what, I'm busy doing this and getting this done for you. He had nothing. And so Truss, I think, was trying to create a new pathway
for this libertarian wing of the Tories to continue on with with their hold on
and to be
prime
clear,
ministership.
it's what she ran on.
Yes, it's what she ran on, and that's why she ran on it, because she needed something. She needed an anchor.
Yeah, and so that's an interesting thing here, just to talk about sort of the democracy aspect, which is, the whole Tory contest to decide who would succeed Johnson. Much of it was attempts to ding Truss that she was too much of a tax cutter. Mm-hmm. Then she gets in, she cuts taxes, it doesn't go well, and then she's gone. It is just a fascinating. She didn't necessarily assume to lead the country through 81,000 people voted to make it happen, and then she gets replaced through an undemocratic process. It's just it's like you said, different than what we have here. I'm not sure if it's better or worse. It's interesting to think about, if there was a tested, precedented measure for Republicans to replace Donald Trump, that wouldn't sort of throw the constitutional order into chaos. If Republicans could have gotten rid of Trump and still controlled who became president, does that change the calculus? Is just an interesting thing to think about. But we'll see who already King Charles will preside over a transfer of power. I mean, a new PM, and so he's racking up milestones early. And before we go, though, a conservative MP made comments on the BBC that I think were deeply resonant, not just in the UK, among political watchers in the UK, but I think resonant with the sort of political disappointment and frustration across, well, I won't say something as sweeping as across Western democracies, but certainly it resonates with, I think, a lot of what Americans are feeling about their own politics. Let me play this. Pretty interesting to see how emotional this Brit gets. Here it is.
To be perfectly honest, this whole affair is inexcusable. It is a pitiful reflection on the Conservative Parliamentary Party at every level. And it reflects really badly, obviously, on the government of the day.
Do you think there's any coming back from this?
I don't think so. But I have to say I've been of that view really since two weeks ago. This is an absolute disgrace. As a Tory MP of 17 years, who's never been a minister, who's got on with it loyally most of the time, I think it's a shambles and a disgrace. I think it is utterly appalling.
So you seem quietly...
I'm livid. And I really shouldn't say this, but I hope all those people that put Liz Truss in number 10, I hope it was worth it. I hope it was worth it for the ministerial red box. I hope it was worth it to sit round the cabinet table, because the damage they have done to our party is extraordinary.
I'm sorry, it's very difficult to convey. You look just furious about this.
I am. I've had enough. I've had enough of talentless people putting their tick in the right box, not because it's in the national interest, but because it's in their own personal interest to achieve ministerial position. And I know I speak for hundreds of backbenchers who right now are worrying for their constituents all the time, but now worrying about their own personal circumstances, because there is nothing as an ex-MP. And a lot of my colleagues are wondering, as many of their constituents are wondering, how they're going to pay their mortgages if this all comes to an end soon.
What do you do next? How do you move on from this?
Well, I'm leaving Parliament at the next general election, and I'm leaving voluntarily. But unless we get our act together and behave like grown-ups, I'm afraid many hundreds of my colleagues, perhaps 200, will be leaving at the behest of their electorate. So that's really pretty much all I've got to say. Patience reached the limit.
And you're probably not the only one.
I'm not.
Wow.
I mean, folks,
Conservative MP Charles Walker, everyone.
folks, I've worked for and with the British for a long time, and that man is showing an immense amount of emotion to use those particular words. And the interviewer is correct that he just looks livid. That is quite an interview, Michael.
And an indictment. Mm-hmm. An indictment that yes, under awful circumstances, but there's a sort of like cathartic nature to it.
Yep.
And that can only happen when the person making the indictment is able to step outside of personal or party interest. So like a Labor member saying that doesn't have the same weight, but you could tell he means it. And he says, I'm on my way out. Like, this is not my, except for the extent to which I'm a citizen. And, that I'm clearly he's, has a political stake and is representative. But, he's like, I'm not going to be responsible for getting us out of this mess. I'm leaving at the next general election. Just a really powerful statement. Melissa, before we wrap up the episode, I thought we'd just briefly, we have 2 more episodes before the midterms, and I would imagine maybe something will intervene, but I would imagine our next 3 episodes will be very midterm focused.
Very midtermy.
Very midtermy, with, of course, the third of those being a recap of what happened. But last week we talked about all of the ways in which the whole midterm campaign season has been unorthodox, has sort of shown these signs that maybe the traditional sort of rules don't apply. Mm-hmm. Then this has been a week where it's been like, oh, maybe this will just be a normal beatdown for the party that controls the White House. Mm-hmm. Maybe the old conventional wisdom that people don't vote, especially Democrats don't vote on abortion. Maybe that will prove true. New York Times had a poll out this week that showed Republicans coming even with women, with female voters, 47%. I believe 47% each, Republicans and Democrats, among women, with abortion ranking way down on the list of priorities. And we've seen a swing in some of these states. I think we talked about Wisconsin last week. Ron Johnson still seems ahead there. I'm interested, just to put a pin in this for next week. Tim Ryan does seem to be making a real play in Ohio,
I agree.
Which is a little surprising and could end up being significant.
Yeah.
One would think that, Republicans have had a significant advantage in Ohio during the Trump years, and J.D. Vance will eke it out. But Tim Ryan really making a go for it, and acting very. He seems to be trying to draw everything he can from Sherrod Brown's successes in the state. But mostly this week has been about Republican momentum. And so in like conventional ways, sort of the economy seems to be holding down Democrats because their party's in the White House and has control of Congress. And so, I think all of what we talked about last week is still in play.
Yep.
I don't think things have swung so much that they can't swing back. And that, some of what we talked about last week, such as polarization leading a significant percentage of voters who disapprove of Biden to vote for Democrats nonetheless. All that's still in play, but I think my sort of bets, so to speak, have moved in the direction of Republicans' favor over the last week.
Yeah, mine have definitely moved as well. I think that some of the polling, even slightly going into favor for some Democrats in some key Senate races, I think it's just overwrought or overdone. I've been thinking for about the last 2 to 3 weeks that the Democrats it's going to be a bloodbath. My prediction is that it's going to be a bloodbath.
Bloodbath. That's strong language, Melissa. What's a bloodbath to you?
A red wave.
What's a red wave to you, Melissa?
That Republicans take the House, and I think that Republicans will be like a 51-49 majority.
And when you say take the House, are they eking it through, or do they have a 15-20 seat advantage in the House?
15 to 20 seat advantage.
Wow. I'm not prepared to make predictions at this point, and so I won't rebut that. I want to wait until our week before episode. But you get bonus points for laying down your marker early. You're of course welcome to adjust in future episodes, but pretty bold of you to
Why not, folks?
Stake that, yeah.
Be bold.
All right. Well, hey, it's been a long week, but we're always really glad to be able to wrap up the week with you. As always, check out the Substack at reclaiminghope.substack.com. Leave a review of the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, your favorite podcast provider service. It would really help us out. And Melissa, you hate when I ask this question.
I really do.
Any closing thoughts?
Closing thoughts. It's getting really cold, everyone, and I don't like it.
Yeah, that is true. But you did have a good day today.
I did.
You had a little shopping experience.
Yeah.
And our tree is just like a bright red right now outside. It's pretty beautiful.
Yeah, the colors just mark the downhill trajectory into winter.
Well, on that hopeful note,
Sorry, everyone. I hate fall. Michael's just dying. He's like, you had to get it in, Melissa, didn't you?
Hope everyone has a great fall week.
Yes, I hope you really do.
And we'll talk to you next week. This is Where We Are.
Bye.